Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for our next URI Cooperative Extension Learn at Home webinar in a series that has taken us through many different topics over the course of almost the past year. We are really excited to have Sue Scotty back tonight. Sue is my friend and colleague. She's a URI Master Gardener, part of the class of 2004, and she is also the vegetable greenhouse propagation leader for our spring plants. So if any of you are familiar with the vegetables that the URI Master Gardener program grows, this woman right here is a big part of the success of that. So we're in for a treat tonight. Sue, as I said, has been a master gardener for a long time. She's been growing vegetables all her life. She did a seed starting webinar for us 2 weeks ago that you can find on the URI Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. I would encourage those of you who didn't join us for that to check out that recording. I learned a ton. And I'm sure we will all learn a ton tonight for our seed starting and transplanting outdoors talk. So I just have a couple slides and then I'm going to turn it over to Sue. If you're having trouble with your volume, I would advise you to check to make sure the sound on your device is turned up. Otherwise, if you're having trouble with sound, you'll be able to watch this on YouTube afterwards. So my name is Kate Venturini. I always forget to introduce myself. I am here as an educator on behalf of URI Cooperative Extension. For those of you who are not familiar with Cooperative Extension, we are the outreach arm of the Land Grant Institution, which in Rhode Island is URI. And we, myself, my colleagues, who are faculty, staff, students, and volunteers, pride ourselves on our work, which centers around disseminating science-based information to folks to help them solve problems. In this case tonight, we are focused on our food systems and agriculture area of focus, and we hope that the information we send out to you through the interweb here helps you grow food this season and provide for your family or for others less fortunate. So we're excited to do that. And I would also just add that we are working really hard to make sure that this information is available to everyone. So if you can share these recordings with folks who would benefit from the information, folks who might not traditionally come to URI for information, we would really appreciate that. We're really committed to inclusion, and so thank you in advance for your help in spreading the word. So a few housekeeping items. You'll notice there is a chat. When you send a message through the chat, it's only going to come to myself and Sue. And so we're actually going to ask you to use the Q&A function, which on your screen is on the bottom right-hand corner. There's 3 dots, and if you click on those, you'll bring up the Q&A. And you are welcome to actually mute you, Sue. You are welcome to enter questions in the Q&A. I will say generally the questions that are answered early on in the program end up being answered. So we will answer those at the end. Also, you will receive an email from messenger@webex.com. It'll probably go in your spam folder, but there's a very important survey in there where we try to gauge what you've learned, and that's really important for us in Extension because we're always evaluating how effective our educational programs are. So thank you in advance for filling out that survey. I really appreciate it. It'll take you less than 2 minutes, I promise. And lastly, as I mentioned, all of these sessions are recorded on the University of Rhode Island's Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. And so you can access that recording or share it with your friends. We closed caption them for the hearing impaired, and so please do stay tuned to our YouTube page. And finally, I just direct your attention, I'll probably put this slide up at the end when we're doing questions, but we have some really great really straightforward gardening resources, a few of which we'll touch on tonight, available at this link, uri.edu/mastergardener/gardening resources. You can also just Google URI gardening resources and they'll come up. Also, we have a gardening and environmental hotline where in COVID times, we have real live people answering emails. So if you see a pest on a plant this summer and you don't know what it is, you can snap a picture of it, send it in to gardener@uri.edu, and someone will return your email within 3 business days. That is a pretty amazing service, staffed by URI Master Gardener volunteers. We also have a webinar every other Tuesday at 7 p.m. right here. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sue, who I will unmute. And again, folks, look for that Q&A box for questions. I hope you enjoy the program.
There we go. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to those who are joining us for the second half of the gardening section. So today, basically, we're going to talk about potting up the seed starts that we hopefully have, getting ready to do. We're also going to talk about preparing your garden, some basic plant needs, planting the garden, soil preparation, some watering considerations, and then we'll get right into the meat of it, how to direct sow, and how to transplant your seedlings. Next. So potting up our seed starts. So why do we want to do that? So if they start out in that little tiny cup on the side there, we're going to need to give the roots some more room to grow. We're going to do that after the first to second set of true leaves appear. The first set that comes up from are called cotyledons, and they just look normal. They're just little round leaves. And then this true set of leaves, like on tomatoes, will start having the ridges and will start looking like the actual plant. So that's what true leaves mean. And then we'll talk a little bit about picking apart when we get to the demo. You see there's just some different stages, the little tiny one into a 6-pack and 6-pack into a larger pot, and from a larger pot we're going into the garden. Next slide. So preparing our garden, we need to take a look at where you want to have it. If you haven't put it in yet, if you have one, you still want to kind of just double check these things. Does it get 6 hours of direct sunlight? So it needs at least that to really get the energy that it needs for vegetable plants. Are you outside of the root zone? Are there trees nearby? Because they're going to get underneath your garden and they're going to take a lot of the nutrients that you want to have for your vegetable garden. At least 10 feet away from buildings, particularly older buildings, not so much the newer ones, just the lead concerns of peeling paint and that sort of thing. And you don't want to put it over your septic tank. The joke is everything's greener on the septic tank, right? But the pathogens, you don't want those growing up in your lettuce. So you want to make sure that you're as safe as possible. Protect it from winds if you can. You can't always get everything, but the best you can. Well-drained soil is a must. You don't want it puddling. You don't want to be in a swampy area. And fairly level so that when you do water, it doesn't all drain to one side. And if you have an established garden, I would say take a look at it. I put my garden in at this house 20 years ago, and we rebuilt it last year, and I had to make it smaller because of the trees. The trees had grown up enough that the one back end of the garden wasn't getting as much sun as it really needed, and things just weren't growing back there. So we tightened it up a little bit and put it more into the sun. So even if you have an established garden, it's a good thing to go out there and look every year what's changed in your environment. Next slide. So you want to make a plan. So where does your sun come from? That's important. Where's your water? How far do you have to carry it? Or do you need hoses? Nearby trees and buildings, because they are shaded again. So if the sun's here and the building's there, what kind of shade is happening. Sowing and harvest sequencing. So if you want to do peas early on, they're going to get past, and then you can plant something else in that spot. So really taking a look at what you want to grow, when they should be planted, and can you succession plant. I do my beans. I do about every 2 weeks. I plant another section of the beans so that I have them always going. Plant heights. So if your sun's coming from, the left side and you've got your big tomato plants here and they're shading part of your garden, you want to make sure that the plants that are in the shade that the tomato plants are causing are ones that can take a little less sunshine. So you want to keep all of that in mind. Your plant rotation. So if it's a new garden, you don't need to worry about that first year, but you want to rotate your plants as best as possible. I have a small raised bed gardens. I do the best I can not to plant tomatoes in the same place. If you can rotate them every 3 years, that's good. Just because they'll use up the nutrients that they need. And then if you put a bean or something like that in their place, that'll actually give back some of the nutrients that the tomatoes are going to need the next year. So you cut down on your disease, you spread around the nutrients that the different plants need. So you really want to try to make sure that you're rotating your beds, particularly from your nightshades, which are your tomato, eggplant, and pepper plants, with your other ones like your legumes, like your beans and your peas, which will add nitrogen back to your beds. And then what kind, if it's a new bed, a new garden, what kind of beds do you want? Do you want them raised? Do you want it just to be in the ground? Does it need to have paths? We suggest, if you're older like me, you might want to grow them up a little bit. It's nice to not have to bend over as far. If you're just starting new and you want to just till up some soil, that's fine too. But really be thinking about what do you want to have. And if it's a new garden, we definitely suggest that you start small. You can always add from there. You want to make sure that you're successful in your first year. And if you overdo it, sometimes it can become overwhelming, and then you don't have as much fun with it. So start small. We recommend about a 4x8 for your first year. Yes. All right, so get down to the fun stuff. Now that we know we have a place where we can grow them, what do we like? Okay, you want to grow vegetables that you're going to enjoy. What does your family like to eat? So then you want to say, okay, these are all the ones, make a list of that, and then you're going to look them up, and I'll talk about how in just a minute. Are they direct sown, like the peas and radishes and carrots? Or are they things that I need to start early or I need to buy, like the peppers and the tomatoes and eggplants? When you're looking at your seed packets, it's going to say it. When you're looking at your catalog, it's going to say when you should be planting things. And then there's also the Rhode Island planting calendar, which will tell you when to plant things indoors or outdoors. And that might be our next slide. If we go ahead and go to the next slide. Nope, not quite yet. So these are some things that you can direct. So you can see how I was talking about before about your succession planting. So you get to plant your carrots and endive and lettuces and peas and things like that really soon. Okay, those can go in about the time you can work the soil. And then when you get later, there's going to be your cucumbers. So if your peas are going to be done, maybe you can put your cucumbers in the same spot. So kind of looking at those sort of things. Next slide. All right, so this is our planting calendar, and that is, you can find that on the resources page. We'll take you to the Rhode Island planting calendar. I'm just going to talk about it real quick in that it lists all of the vegetables, and then it has the little I there means to start the seeds indoors, and then it will also have the little S, which is for seeding, for sowing outdoors. T for transplanting, so you'll see like the I to plant indoors, and then the T as to when you can plant it outdoors. And it'll give you also the idea of how long, once you either sow the seed or transplant it, how many days until you can expect to start harvesting it. And it goes from asparagus to turnips. I think the next slide is the second half of it. So you can see that there's quite a few different vegetables on there, so you should be able to find some that you like. And get an idea of when they're grown, how long it takes to harvest them. You'll notice some of them have, it says S across a bunch of months. So you don't get them in right away. You could get them in later, or you could get them in early. And if you eat them, you can plant them again. And again, like I said, with beans, you can do that. You can do a couple different plantings. When they start dying back, you can either take them out and replant, or you can plant part of a row, then 2 weeks later plant part of a row, and just keep rotating it around like that. Next slide. For seeds and seedlings, little plug here for the earlier class. If you want to see how to start those seeds indoors, you can watch the Seed Starting Indoors webinar, which is on the YouTube channel. Next slide. Test your soil, okay? You really want to make sure that your soil is what the plants prefer. So you can get the pH test done through the Master Gardeners, and that will give you a good basics. If it's a new garden, we do recommend that you get the full soil test done. And then every several years, say every 3 years or so, go ahead and get a full soil test done again. You're always trying to improve your soil. Soil is an ongoing, you're always adding compost, you're always checking the pH. It's a constant thing that you're working on to get that beautiful soil that will grow your plants so well. When you go to the different sites, if you go to UConn or UMass to send away for a full soil test, or for URI Master Gardeners, I believe also, will tell you what you need to do and what they need for your soil. So usually you take the soil from several different places in the garden, mix that together, but they'll tell you how much soil they want. I just sent mine out to UConn this year, and they wanted a cup of soil. It usually is supposed to be dry when you send it, but they'll give you all of that information of how they want to receive the soil and how much they need to do the test that you're asking to be done. Then they send you back what it comes out at and what they recommend. You need to add lime, you need to add this, and they'll give you amounts to add to your soil and different types of products that you can add to your soil, whether it's a bone meal or depending on what your actual soils need, which is great. So then you can go ahead and get your soil ready. So while your little seedlings are under the lights in your basement, but you know, there's no snow in the garden anymore, you can go out there and you can start preparing your soil and mixing in things based on the directions that they send. Next slide, whatever it is. Watering. So how are you going to water? You could let it rain. Around here in Rhode Island, it gets really hot. You probably need to add some extra water if you want to have really good success. So how close is your garden to the spigot? Is it someplace where you can just fill up there in your watering can? You can carry it up and that's not a problem. You need hoses. You need to bring your hoses up and then use the watering can. There's a way to use soda bottles to do kind of your own little drip system, and I'll show you that in the demo as to how you set that up. Then you can do soaker hoses. So soaker hoses are the ones that look kind of foamy and they weep when you turn them on. So the whole thing weeps. The whole length of that hose lets the water out, which is good. You can kind of leave the hose around where it is. That's what I have. It isn't very changeable from year to year. It can still drip. I actually have electrical tape on part of it because I didn't want it jumping over and just dripping on the mulch. So those are things to consider. But I can turn it on and it waters it, and I don't have to use a whole bunch of watering cans and that sort of thing, which is nice. Drip irrigation is, the top of the line if you want to spend a lot of money, but it can be worth it. They can help you configure it's tubing with little holes in it, or there's little emitters, which are like little tiny sprinklers. You can just go hog wild with drip irrigation, but it's very efficient. It puts the water right where the plants are. Since it's on the soil, or it can be underneath a mulching or plastic mulching also. So it's very efficient. It doesn't dry up much. And that is a really big consideration to make sure that you are getting the water that you need. You need about 1 inch of water a week. So you either can do a rain gauge, or just make sure that you're out there watering. You can dig down into the soil. You should be able to get down several inches. It should still be wet. And if it's not, then you need to go ahead and water. So those are some things that you want to think about. You can do overhead watering. And clearly when it rains, it's overhead watering. But you want to do that in the morning so that it can dry off. And not in the middle of the afternoon where you're wasting a bunch of water because it's evaporating before it's even getting to where it needs to. And if you do it in the evening, your plants are staying wet, and that just encourages mildews and disease. So you want to do first in the morning watering, particularly if you're going to be watering overhead. Best to water the soil. Really, the plants don't need to be watered. You can water the soil. It's the roots that need the water. Next slide. Planting outside. So timing is really crucial. You get all excited, you have a really nice day, and you want to get out there and plant, but you got to remember that the soil needs to be warm also. And you want to look at your last and first frost dates, mostly first. So if you're planting something, are you going to be able to get it to harvest? So if you're looking at your planting calendar and you're like, oh, it's July, if I plant, the beans now, will they make it to harvest? Maybe, but you can at least plan on that. You know that you're taking a risk if you plant real late. If you plant too early, you're taking a risk that there's going to be a later frost and you're either going to kill your plants or you're going to need to get out there and cover them off and do all sorts of things. Hardening off, which we'll talk about a little bit more, which is preparing your seedlings to be outside. It's taking them from the pampered environment out to the garden where they're really not going to get pampered anymore, and they're going to get rained on, and there's going to be wind and all kinds of things that they're not used to when they're in your basement. Wait until the night temperatures are above 50. Again, you don't want to stress your plants out. You could plant them when it's lower than that. You could plant them when the soil is colder than that, but you're stressing out your plants, and when you stress out your plants, they're more likely to get disease, and they'll also just sit there. They don't continue to grow. If you're wondering why they're not going anywhere and you put them out way too early, they're just trying to survive. So if you wait a little bit longer, let it get warm enough, get them out there, and they're going to take off and be really excellent plants for you. If you are impatient, you can use some season extenders. That's where you do a hoop house, or if you have a little greenhouse that you can put to be helping to harden them off. But you do want to watch the weather. If it looks like you've got them out there and it's going to be cold, you do want to cover them up. Some sheets that are held up so they're not squashing down on the plants, just to give them those couple extra degrees. And then you just have there's our hardening off, or our hardness zones for this area. If you're not from Rhode Island, you can look those up online as to what your zones are. But here you'll notice on all your seed packets or when you're buying plants, it'll say hardy in zone, whatever. And there again is our frost dates for this area. First one's around October 15th, and last one is around May 15th. Next slide. So this is a little slide here on how to harden off. And again, hardening off is really important, and it's something that people like to rush, but you really need to not rush it. It does make a big difference. Hardening off think of it as the first day at the beach. Okay, if you have been inside all winter and then you go out to the beach and you spend all day at the beach and you don't put on sunblock and you come home and you're all burned, well, the same thing's going to happen to your plants. So you want to put them out, get them acclimated a little bit, bring them in at night because it's going to be cold. It's going to take a week or two to do this. Place them in a shaded area to begin with. Bring them out in warm days. If it's really windy, if you end up with a day that's super windy, bring them in. Just let them stay inside for that day. Later on in the process, if you're into the second week, maybe you can leave them out there as long as they aren't something that's going to knock over their pot and break them that way, as long as they're protected. If it's below 45, again, they're going to stress, and your plants will stress some when you harden them off. So they may not look as beautiful as they did when they were in your basement growing under your lights and getting pampered. Because they're going to stress a little, but that's okay. If you know that they're not going to be, 100% perfect, they will acclimate and they will be back to looking beautiful again. The cold frame, hoops, plastic, small greenhouses can also provide environments for that. You can have the sides down, slowly pick them up. We have a big hardening off house at URI that we bring them in and the sides roll up and it's really cool. So we can adjust the temperature, and since greenhouses are double layer, so it takes away some of the UV light, and the hardening off house is single layer, so it lets more through. So it kind of gives them that little bit of sort of shade. After hardening out, off, they really are good. They'll tolerate the light. They'll be able to do a little bit of frost, but I would cover them up. When you hear there's going to be frost, cover them up. Don't take the chance. You've either spent money or a lot of time, and you want to make sure that they really get to that point in time. And they're ready to go. So ready to plant. So seed packets have all the information you need to know about spacing, the depth, the thinning. Some seeds are really tiny, so when you put them in, it's really hard to, they might say space them out every 4 inches, but that can be really difficult. So you might plant a whole row of them, and as they come up, you're just going to thin them out so that the carrots or whatever have enough room to actually turn into full carrots. You're going to purchase your seedlings from either a local grower. If you haven't grown your own, you're going to follow the planting calendar again and watch the weather. Okay, you may have been really nice, but you want to make sure that the next several days are going to be really nice too after you get them out. And we can see a little bit of the seed packets there. I actually can't read them from here, but they will give you all of the information on spacing, depth, and when to plant, or whether to plant them, start them inside or outside. Next. So the day of seeding, you want to make sure that on the day of seeding or planting that it's overcast. Do it in the late afternoon. Again, it's a really stressful time. If you're putting the seeds in at 11 o'clock in the morning and then you water them in really good and then it's really hot out, you have more likelihood of having those seeds dry, and you want to keep them wet. So if you plant them in the afternoon, it's a lot more comfortable in the middle of the day anyway. You can water them in. You know that it's going to stay damp for them the whole night through. The next morning you can go out and double check on them. If they need to be watered again, you can do that. Your soil should be damp when you put it in, so either plant after a rain or water your garden so that the soil is wet. You don't want it to be soaking, but it should be damp. Think about it, when you put that little seed down there and you want it to stay wet, if all that water you're putting in is already soaking away from, soaking up the soil instead of soaking into the seed, well, that's not good. So do an overall watering beforehand if it's dry, and then plant into that. Follow your planting calendar again, just when to plant those seeds, and have all your stuff ready. Have your row markers ready. Because when you get out there and you start planting, and then if you have to stop, you have to make row markers. So that's something you can do now. When you're planning what you're going to grow, go ahead and make out your row markers. I like to have one on either end of the row, because sometimes I stop my rows halfway, this 2 feet and then that 2 feet. And you think you're going to remember, and you turn around and then you're going to go plant something else, and then you can't remember where the end of the row is. So have your row markers ready, have your trowel out, so that when you get out there, you can just go ahead and do what you need to do. So sowing, and again, it will tell you on the seed packet on how they want to have it sown. So it'll say row or hill. So row is row. Hill is sort of a round area. I do actually make a little hill because I think it loosens up that soil. It makes it a little bit easier to put the seeds in, and it gives them a little bit more unpacked soil to germinate into. But it really, a hill is planting 4 or 5 seeds sort of in a round circle. Actually, that's a little picture there of a hill with a marker in the middle, and the seeds will be around the outside. And then you want to do your rows with one on either end. You're going to, depending on the depth that it calls for, you're either going to make a little trench, put it in, and then cover it up. Or if it's really shallow, you can just sort of press them in to the soil or sprinkle some over top. You don't want your seeds on top of the soil and then to put like a hump of soil over top, because that's just going to wash away when it rains or when you water. So you do want them into the soil and then covered. And again, with the seed packet, it will tell you how deep and how far apart they should be. And then again, water gently. The same thing as when we were doing the seed starting. You don't want to take your hose because you're going to leave all these divots in your garden. So you want to make sure that it has either a spigot on the end that you can do with a shower setting on a hose, or that you're using a watering can that has all the little holes on the end so that the spigot has a gentle watering, so it's more like rainfall than a torrent. So you want to make sure you do that. And the reason that we water things in is because we want the seeds to settle down and make contact with the soil, and we want the soil to settle down too. Sometimes when you're planting, you water them in, and one of them looks like they come to the top, and it's like, oh, what's happening there? And, maybe you've washed it off or whatever. You can, poke that seed back in and get them all, in there perfect. And that they're going to need that water to make the seed coat soften so that they can go ahead and germinate. So want to have good contact with the soil, watered in, softening up the seed coat so that they'll be all ready to germinate. Next slide. Transplanting out into the garden. You just hear a theme here. Don't plant too early. It is so hard sometimes when the weather's nice early to not be like, oh, I'm just going to go plant everything. But you really need to plant it. You'll get things. Don't worry, it will happen. Start with plants that are hardened off. So if you're purchasing them, you should be able to ask whoever it is that you're purchasing them from if the plants are hardened off. How long have they been outside? Have they been in the greenhouse the entire time? So you'll know what you have to do when you bring them home. Same thing as with the seeds. You want to start on a cool or cloudy day, and you want the soil to be damp. Again, when you're transplanting anything, you're stressing it out. You're playing with its roots, and you're stuffing it down into a hole, and you're burying it, and it's going, what the heck? So you want to do it when it's going to be calm. You don't want to go in there and then get broiled under the sun. So nice and cool works best. Planting in the evenings. Dig your hole down. If you dig down into your hole and go, uh-oh, if I didn't get the water down far enough, put some water down in there. Dig that around so that you've got some nice moist soil for that. And then sometimes you want to use a starter fertilizer, and that will help get them established. Phosphorus will help with the roots, so make sure it has some phosphorus in it. I'm not going to tell you what fertilizer you should buy, but you should read the instructions on the fertilizer too. Most of them will have a section that will be what to do when you're transplanting. So how far to put it in, how to put it in, how much to put in. More is not better. Okay, too much fertilizer will burn your roots, particularly when you're mixing it into the lower part where you're going to put all their roots. Okay, so read the directions. If anything, a little less is better. You can always add more later if you feel like you need it, but read the directions on the box or the bag or the bottle as to what you should be doing in that situation. Keep the mature plant size in mind. Remember what the spacing requirements are, and that can be really hard to do. You've got these little tiny tomato plants, and you're putting them in, and it says they need to be 2 feet apart, and you get finished planting, you're like, really? Like there's nothing in the garden. But they're going to grow, and when they're over 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide, you're going to be like, I'm really glad that I spaced them out. And the lower picture that you're seeing there is something that I definitely like to do. Is I either cut my 6-packs apart, or I take my pots and I place them out in the garden before I plant anything. I kind of lay it out and say, okay, does that work? Does everything fit? Resist the urge to say, oh, I can fit one more, which I'm guilty of. But again, just looking at how you're spacing it, lay it out, and then start your planting. I guess I already started with the, said to start with damp soil, both in the garden. Oh, yes, and in the pot. Your pot should be wet. You don't want your plant to be all dried out starting with. You want to have it have as much water beforehand so that it's in good shape. You don't want it wilting. Also, if the root ball is dry when you pull it out, it's going to stress out a lot more, and the roots are going to break more. So you want to make sure that your pot that your plant is in is watered, and your hole you're going to plant it into is watered as well. Next slide. talked a little bit about this. So digging your hole, you take your plant, take your pot, you're gonna wanna dig the hole a little bit wider. If it's, for most plants, you want the hole to be about the same depth as the pot. You're gonna remove the plant carefully. So what I like to do is squish the pot a little bit, sort of stick your fingers over the top and turn it over and tap the bottom. And that should pull it out, and then when it'll be in your hand, and then you can flip it over from there. Don't pull it from the stems, because that's kind of like grabbing it from its neck and grabbing it out. And there's all sorts of little vessels that go up in the stem, and that's what gives the plant all of its nutrients. It's, you know, just like the veins in your neck, okay? So you don't want to cut those off. You don't want to damage those, because that's what you're going to need for the plant to pull up water and nutrients and everything that it's going to need to grow. So remove them carefully. You're going to loosen the roots, and I'm going to hopefully show you some that are a little root bound. You want the roots to be loose on the bottom. You can kind of tickle them down with your fingers. And the reason for that is once they start going around in a circle, they'll keep going around in a circle. So you want to loosen them up so that they'll start growing out. You want them to grow down and out and really have a great root system to hold your plants in place. So you're going to loosen those roots a little bit. For most plants, you're going to place them in the hole at the same soil level. Okay, so you can see the little example there. There's the pot. You don't want it down too deep. If you plant a lot of plants, like a lot of your herbs and stuff, too deep, then they're going to rot there and you're going to kill them. So you want to have that same soil level when you plant your plants. Rule of thumb is if you're not sure if it can get planted deep, then plant it at the same level. Okay, that way you know you're safe and it will grow and you won't hurt it. To put it in, press the soil firmly around it. Sometimes you need to sort of poke it around the plant and then add some more, and then you're going to water it in again. After you water it in, take a good look. Like, did it go down? Is it still at the same soil level? Did the soft stuff you put around the edges, did that all fall down in? Do you need to add more? So don't just water and walk away. Okay, you got to water, reevaluate. Are you still where you want it to be? You can adjust it at that point. If 3 days down the line you decide, you know, you didn't do it right, you can change it, but now you're disturbing the roots all over again. So let's only stress our plants out once by really making sure that we're doing it correctly the first time. Next slide. All right, so tomatoes, they break the rule. Actually, all of your nightshades do, which is your eggplant, your peppers, and your tomatoes. But mostly your tomatoes is what you're going to do this with, because they're the ones that have a tendency to get leggy. And that's when they get really tall before they get planted. So you're going to dig a really deep hole for them. You want to have 2 to 3 sets of the true leaves still exposed at the top. Sometimes you can get tomato plants that are really huge, and you're like, I can't dig a hole to China. And so what you can do is you can actually lay them horizontally and then just have the leaves come up from there. You're going to remove any leaves that are going to be buried in the soil. Although we might compost, and we'd like to have rotted things and put them on a compost, we don't want them rotting while they're still attached to the plant. So you want to pinch those off, anything that's going to be below the soil level. And then on that bottom slide there, you can see how the roots will come out and they will actually grow out of the stem, and that will give you an even better root system for your tomatoes. So the other tiny slide or picture at the bottom shows one which is down deep but straight, and then the one that's on the side like that. And I have a little demo on that too, of how to make that happen even easier so that you don't break your plant. Next slide. All right, so plant your plant. So this is actually my garden, and the first one on the left there is about June, and it's, it's looking pretty good, but I actually didn't plant my plant. I needed to get that one more tomato plant in, so just sort of snuggled things in a little bit more. The next slide is about mid-August, and you can see they're already, up past my shoulders, and they're filled in. And I tell you, by the end of August, I had myself a tomato jungle, which is not good for the plants. You want them to be able to get air. You want them to be able to breathe. So I had them a little tight. I got a little excited that I wanted that one more variety. So try to plant your plan, and really overall you'll have success. It can be hard because there's so little when you put them in, but they get so big so quick. Next slide. Spend time in your garden. Every day, go out, take a look at what's happening. You can look for bugs. You can look for good bugs, bad bugs, and enjoy it. Your garden should be a haven for you, for your plants. It's fun to see how things change. Take pictures. This year I'm going to do a better job. I'm going to take them from the same place every week, and then you get to see this progress. And then the next year you can go back and go, oh yeah, they do grow. They need to give them space. I think we're into demo time. Yes. All right. Do they see me full screen now, Kate? All right. So we're going to start with our little transplants that we had from last week. So we started some of them in cured cups. There I am, sorry. If you're just here, that's a little eggplant. You can see him. And then there's one here, and he really probably needed to be divided up sometime last week, but I saved him for you guys to see. He's got the cotyledons here, and then two and a half sets of true leaves on this. They're more or less, they're ready to go. These are some that I've already potted up, and I'm going to pot one into this here. And then to keep with we don't need to buy a lot of things. This is a milk carton. Make sure you put holes in the bottom of anything that you use that's from around the house. Make sure it's clean, and make sure you put holes in the bottom. This is the bottom of a soda bottle. Same thing. I just drilled some holes in the bottom of that. I really like the clear containers because you can see the roots, and I find that really fascinating how fast the roots make it all the way to the bottom. That was kind of fun. So what we've been talking about was how to get these out. So a little fork here. So if it doesn't come out right away, we're just going to loosen it around the edges. So let's see, turn them over, give them a little tap. It comes right out. And by doing it that way, I'm supporting it. And you can do that for any size. If people can see this. If you can you see the roots going around in a circle there? Okay. So they're a little tight. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what I call tickling the roots. So we're going to kind of reach in the middle. We're just going to kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. A few of them will rip, but not too bad. We're just kind of tickling them apart. And we'll start letting go. Look at that. We've got our guys. Lay that one down. I'm going to put this one in. This one. I'm going to tuck him way down because he's a tomato. We're going to kind of hold on to him, put the soil around the edges. Like that. And put this guy to the side. We're going to pull this one out. You can see that's what I mean by when they get leggy. So see how we've got all this growth, and they'll do that if the lights aren't real close. I've had a couple different sizes, but he's a pretty nice stem on this little guy, so that's not too bad. So let's do the same thing. Let's cut him from out. There we go. All right. So this one is also root bound, but there's not a second one to pull apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to tickle the roots down again. Just going to give them a little help. If they're really tight, you can actually sort of open them up. But he's not that tight. So I'm just going to open them up again. And I've got a little layer of soil in the bottom here. I'm going to pop him right in. Fill him up. making it nice. That's okay. That's half the fun of it. So remember, this works with tomatoes. Oops, we're gonna be below the cotyledons. That's good. So we're gonna pinch those off. Want to leave just a little bit of room at the top of your containers so that when you water, it's not going to just all run off the top. It has a space to fill up while it's drinking. Well, he's not so leggy anymore, is he? And he's going to grow roots all down the sides there. Take our thing, we're going to water them in, right? Water that one. And again, this, you can take a look at whether or not the soil level is where you want it. This looks pretty good. All right. So that's our indoor garden. These going to go back underneath the lights, and you're going to get the rest of your garden prepared and the rest of your plan prepared. And then suddenly, we're outdoors. So we have our garden here, or we're outdoors. And we're going to talk about watering with water bottle. So I'm going to demo this with a small bottle, with a, I guess like a 12 ouncer. But in your garden, you really probably ought to use either a 1 liter or a 2 liter. I would use a 2 liter bottle if you were going to have like a plant here and a plant there and you wanted to put one in the middle. I would use the 1 liter for an individual plant, say a pepper plant or a tomato plant. You could use these like in a pot, particularly if you were going away for a weekend or something. So I've got two different ways that you can do it. One is this: I have holes in the bottom here and holes around the outside. And that's where you're going to pour your water in. And then the other one is the other way around. It's got holes here and the top here. There are advantages to both. This one, it's a lot easier to get your water in because it's all big and open. It also, you don't have as much control though with the flow, and things could get in. But I think that works fine. So we're going to dig this one in and see where I am. Bury it. Same thing with this one. Bury that down in, and this is what we're going to do. So we fill it. It's going to go and drip down. Fill it up. And that's how it's going to look when it's in the garden. And this is what it's doing underneath. Okay, so you can see how it's dripping out. And this one. Doing the same thing. The difference on this one is if you put the cap on real tight, see how that changes the flow? So if you wanted it just to drip or you wanted it to last longer, you could tighten down that top. If you want it to flow more, you just loosen up the flow so you get more air. So that's how those work. They're really kind of useful for getting the water right down to the roots. So you dig them down in. The other thing you can do with like the 2 liter bottle, if you're putting it between two plants, is to put some holes on the bottom and then put a hole here and over on this side, so that you're watering here, not watering in the front where there isn't any plants, so you can get them to water off to the side. Just a little tip there. If you don't want to do drip irrigation or whatever, you can do that. Now we're going to get our stuff out and ready to plant some seeds. I got these at a home improvement store. They were under $1 for 30 of them, so not too bad. So I'm going to plant my beans. Put that in there. Make my soil level, right? I want my garden to be level. I read the back of my packet, it says sow in average soil, full sun, after danger of frost. Sow in rows 18 to 30 inches apart, so that's the row, and seeds about 3 inches apart. So, and cover with 1 inch of soil. So for beans, I like to make a 12. And I'm going to put things on the other side. So that when I turn around or I get a phone call and my husband comes out and bothers me, I'm not like, oh, what did I do? I like to put my seeds in so I can see them. And since it's a little trench, you want them 1 inch down. Then all we have to do to cover them up is just fill in the trench. Okay. Again, we're going to water those in. So that's how we do a row. Okay, your summer squash, you read the back of it, and it's going to say that you need to put them in a hill. Okay, so we're going to do several in a hill. So I do like to make a hill. Just again, I like to do that because you're not putting it into the firm soil, and you should never walk on your garden. You always want to walk around your garden row so you're not compacting the soil. But this kind of fluffs it up a little bit more. So kind of making like a little plateau. Put our marker in and do the same thing. I didn't open this one. All right, so these are pretty big seeds. If you can't find how far to do them, it's usually 1 or 2 times the size of the seed. We're going to put those around. You know, I always like to put like 5 around. That way, if some doesn't come up, something gets eaten, particularly like if it's a sunflower seed, and you just poke them in. From there, and you're going to water those in as well. The other thing, like with sunflowers or some of your seeds, is that the birds like to visit your garden. So what you can do is you can make a little cage out of chicken wire that you can put over the top until they germinate, and then you can take it away. If it's sunflowers, let's say you've got like one here and one here and one here, you could also take those little the little green berry containers, particularly the ones that have all the little holes in them, and you can put those upside down on them like little cages, so that your squirrels and your birds don't come and eat all of your sunflowers before they've even had a chance to germinate. Just sort of a tip on how to do that. Also have here, just so you can see it, we've got some seed tape. That just lays in. Again, read your seed packet. The nice thing about, this is carrots, the nice thing about seed tape is that it's already spaced for you. So if you can see them or not, like there's a seed here, and here, and here, and here. Because they're really little teeny tiny seeds. Or you can put a whole row down and just know that you really do need to separate them out. If you leave them too tight, you aren't going to get those nice big beautiful carrots because they're just not going to have room to grow. Or they're going to grow into each other and they're just still not going to get to be what you want. And then this one, I think I showed this in the last class, but this is one that would go on top of a pot, and it's got lettuces and arugula on it. You just put it down on the top of the pot, cover it with a little soil, and water that. Plant the plant squares, all these nifty little things that they've got out there in the academia. All right, let's go on to our plants. So we're going to plant some tomatoes. So again, we're going to have our soil is going to be moist. How deep I'm going to be able to get in. We're going to be growing beans in the greenhouse. Like we said before, turn it over, we're going to squish, tap, out. Roots on that look pretty good. We really don't need to do much on those. Those are going to be fine. Put that in. I only have so far I can go here, so we'll just go as deep as we can. Push it in, and take those cotyledons out. Now we had the little one that was going horizontal in the pictures, but here's a tip for you. if you decide that that's what you're going to do, like if you've got the really tall tomato plants, so you're like, there's no way I can dig it, a hole that deep, so I'm going to need to do them on the side, or they're just going to be tall. This morning, I laid this one down. Okay, he's all ready to plant horizontal. Okay, he grew up for me, so all I need to do is, I did cut the sides of the plastic earlier today to loosen it up a little bit, so you can make sure you can get it out and they can be a little tight. But you can see how he's growing to the side. So we're just gonna, these are too close together. It should be 2 feet apart, but I don't have that much room in my little indoor-outdoor garden here. So we're gonna dig down. Just gonna lay it on the side. Probably can't see that. But there he is. And you want to space it from the center of the plant. Take those. And that will root down that whole end there. So these are like 6 inches apart. So you want to measure your plants from the center of the plant to the center of the plant. So even though my root ball is over here, we're going to measure from center of plant to center of plant. So if you're laying a bunch of them down, you want to lay one down and lay one down and lay one down so that the roots are getting as much of their own space as possible. Okay. Just about there. Yeah, and you, again, if your hole is dry, make sure that you put, you're putting some water in that hole. And if you want to add some fertilizer at that point, you can go ahead and do that. Mix it in so that it's not right up against the roots. And you're going to end up, they look small now, but when they're like this, they'll be giving you all sorts of wonderful tomatoes. And I think we're ready for questions.
All right. Furiously taking notes over here myself. So we have, as you can imagine, lots of questions. And I have tried to group them. While we're on the subject, there were a lot of questions about the soda bottles, and specifically about whether you use them only in the beginning of this process, or if you actually keep them in the soil throughout the season, and how often you put water in them, et cetera, et cetera.
So you put them in before planting. So once you figured out where you're going to put your plants, you're going to dig your bottle in. You are going to leave it in. I pulled it out so that you could see what it was doing underneath the ground. But you're going to leave them in. You don't want to, you could put them in later, but if you put them in later, you're going to be disturbing the roots that are there, and you want to not disturb the roots. The idea of doing it is that it stays down, and when you're watering, it would water down deep, because you want your roots to go down deep. If you only water on the first couple inches of your soil, then your roots grow up and you have unstable plants. So when those winds come up in August, you want to make sure that your tomatoes have as deeper roots as possible. So you are going to leave them in the ground. You can use the same sort of measurement that you would for a top. So if you come out to your garden and it looks pretty dry, go ahead and dig down a couple of inches. And if you dig down an inch and it's wet, then you don't really need to water yet. If you dig down a couple of inches and it's dry, you're going to need to go ahead and water. And that will get it right down. If you want to kind of play, it's going to vary. I don't have a good answer for how much to put in the bottle. I mean, it does drip it down and it is going to drain out. It's not going to get it to the point where it's all soggy. You'll probably do it once a week. But depending on the weather and depending on your soil, will really dictate how often you need to water your garden in general. If your soil holds more moisture, you're going to be watering less. If it rains a lot, you're going to be watering less. If it's hotter, we're going to be watering more. That's something that, again, when we said go out and look at your garden, enjoy your garden, and check your soil. Does it need water? What do your plants look like? They'll tell you too. they'll curl up or they'll wilt if they get really hot. I had to water a couple times this summer in the morning and in the afternoon because they just couldn't make it through. How hot? There's no.
Yeah, and that the soda bottles serve a couple different functions, but basically it's that if you're watering just the top of the soil and you don't have drip, which is continuously dripping,
Right.
it's like we talk about with mowing your lawn. The longer you let the blades of grass grow, the deeper the roots will be underground. The reason, if you think about it, like the example you gave, if you all think about a golf course and how the grass is treated at golf courses, it needs a lot of love and care because that grass is cut so short. It has very little biomass to photosynthesize, and the roots are just that meek under the ground. So it's kind of the same idea. The deeper we can get the roots to grow, the stronger the plant will be. And with the nightshade plants, we had a couple questions. Do you plant peppers and eggplants deep to encourage a stronger foundation like tomatoes?
You can. They will throw out the roots. They don't do it as quickly as the tomatoes. Let's find my little. The other thing with both peppers and eggplants, this guy was started on 115. That's the same time these plants were started. They grow slower and they don't get that legginess that tomatoes will get. So like this one, I mean, I might plant it a little deep, but I wouldn't really plant it too much more than the depth that it's at. But you can. So you don't really have to worry about if it plants up. I usually plant my pepper, particularly my jalapenos, a little deep because they grow so tall without a lot of branches. They always seem like there's sticks in the wind. So I'll try to plant those a little deep just to make sure that they get a little extra roots. But really, your tomatoes really excel at growing the roots off of the stems, and they need it.
Great. That makes sense. Let's see. So there were also a lot of questions when you were talking about repotting, about why you wouldn't just start with the 4-inch pot or the milk carton to begin with and avoid planting again. There were a lot of expended energy concerns with this group of folks. So can you just talk about that for a little bit?
Two reasons. The first being, particularly if you're not using necessarily fresh seed, is know what you've got. So you can plant a whole bunch and be like, okay, these are good ones. That didn't come up. I didn't plant that many, but I had a couple that nothing came up. So then I haven't filled a container of soil this size and had nothing come up. Or you could do a couple different seeds in there. Roots also, you're trying to grow a nice root ball. So it will fill this up and it kind of makes a nice little root ball. Again, you don't want to get to the point where they're so jammed in there that they're twirling around. You bring it up and it will expand. And you bring it up and it will expand again. If you started out in this, the roots kind of go all over the place. When you pull it out, now you've got sort of scraggly roots all over the place. Does that make sense? They actually like to have a little bit more containment going up. But you certainly could. If you don't want to do that, plant it in something bigger. These are really tiny. I just think they're really fun. And they already have the hole in the bottom. So, I do a lot of actually my annuals in these because I never seem to get those as big as I get the vegetables. So then I might transplant them up once, or I might plant them right into the garden. Out of one of these. So yeah, you can. Some of it's a soil conservation, and if you planted 12 little seeds, and really you only need 1 or 2 of that variety, you can just take the best of the best and plant those down and plant them up, and then you haven't wasted all the soil or space.
Well, the soil conservation point is an interesting one, and I think that'll make sense to folks. Someone asked actually a lot of questions about raised beds. We probably need to do a webinar on raised beds too, because there's a lot of questions um, about building them, tending them. And one person asked, how do you, how deep do they generally have to be? And then how do you fill them if and I've seen people do different things. My mom had them and she actually put mulch in the bottom because it's a lot less expensive and lighter. And then put the potting mix on top. So can you talk a little bit about that? Just
Yeah, so when you're putting in a new garden, you know, if you're doing a raised bed, you're gonna dig the soil, like you're still gonna have the soil that's underneath, unless you test that soil and it comes back bad or whatever. But so you're gonna put fresh soil in, however high up you build it. I have mine, like I said, I built them 20 years ago. If I built them now, I'd built them another later on. I think it's what is that, like a 10-inch board around the side. You could do it with two. I'm not going to get into the construction. There's a million different ways to do it. Like I said, it could be a whole class. Most people buy their soil, to buy like a garden soil. That's when you could do a garden soil. Or if you're filling it for the first time, I'd probably have somebody bring it if it's a big garden to fill it. You don't want all compost, it kind of thinks, oh, I'll just fill it with compost. You really don't want that. You really want to have like a garden soil and then add a layer of compost. And every year, like I said, you're going to be amending your garden. Add a layer of compost pretty much every year. You want to add about 1 inch of compost to the top. And then you get to know your soil. You kind of start to say, oh, last year this didn't work well. Or when you send away your soil test again, like you said, they'll give you an update on what you need to do to keep improving it. And you just keep where it's an ever-growing process. And you could do there are people who just study soil. Actually, I think it's really fun. One of the local farmers that I work with went to a soil contest out in Oregon. Actually, he did really well. But, people brought their soil from all over, and they were judging on the nutrients and the makeup and, how, I don't know. I don't even know all the things they were judging on, but, you could talk on soil forever, and that's not my expertise.
yeah, and I think I appreciate that too. It's not mine either, and we all have our strengths, right? But I think one of the important points that we can make here is that having your soil tested at least every 3 years is about the best thing you can do, especially because if you all watch this recording when it's up on YouTube, if you missed anything, there's a slide that shows a chart with the preferred pH for different kinds of plants. So there are different kinds of vegetables. There are vegetables that prefer more acidic soil. There are vegetables who prefer the pH a little bit higher, maybe at 8. So you can really drive yourself nuts if you don't arm yourself with information. And so getting a soil test is an amazing way to figure out not only what your pH is. So if you find out your pH in your vegetable garden is a 4.5, it's going to take you a little while to bring the pH up. So instead of failing, you can actually look at that chart in the presentation and look for the plants that prefer lower pH, and you might actually be able to get a yield right now before that pH is risen up. The other thing is that generally when you get a soil test, they will tell you, at least the master gardeners do, what your predominant texture is. And so if you get a soil test back and it says, you're dealing with mostly sand, well, when you learn a little bit more about soil, you'll know that mostly sandy soil drains nutrients very fast. And so you might actually need more fertilizer, but you don't want to apply any of these things blind. So if you take 3 things away tonight, one of them is that getting a soil pH and texture test is really important. And there's a lot of folks asking, how do I amend my soil every year? These are loaded questions. And I would say if you go on our YouTube page, there's probably entire webinars that will help you answer some of these questions. They're good questions.
Yeah, start with the test. and then the recommendations from there. And like I said, every year you're gonna be working on improving it. If you have a lot of improvements to do, when the test comes back, you'll make some of those, then get the test again the next year. You know, if things are growing well and you didn't have to do a lot to it, then, you know, every 3 years would be enough to, you know, kind of make sure you're staying on top of it.
Someone asked about, there was a couple questions about lights. You know, one person asked, can you start seeds without grow lights? And then someone else asked if a sun lamp counts as sunlight for plants that need UV light, because it's all they have at the moment. Thought those were good questions.
I don't know that much about sun lamps. I would think that that would work because the whole point of those are usually to give you the light. So like, particularly I used to live in Seattle where it can be cloudy a lot. And a lot of people would have sun lamps just so that you can not feel so depressed if you're not seeing the sun. You can grow seeds without grow lights. You can do it in a window. What will happen is you will get your tomatoes and stuff will get a little leggier because they're going to grow towards the window. Keep turning them around so that, you know, they grow this way, then they grow that way, then they grow this way. Oh, I know. I had one other thing. I'm going to jump ahead just a sec. For anybody that was here 2 weeks ago, those are the microgreens we planted in the class. So that's
wow.
2 weeks of arugula, and really they're too big. I could have started eating them, you know, half a week ago. So if anybody else planted them, I hope that they're having success as well.
And our friend Roger, hi Roger, miss you, is sharing that on March 15th, the Master Gardener Regional Soil Testing, which is contactless. You can just drop it off and visit our website to figure out where we'll be opening. A lot of great questions. Andrea's asking, do we suggest only doing a few vegetables for your first year? I would say, as only you know, I started vegetable gardening in 2020, and I probably grew maybe 15 different things, and only 7 of them I grew really well. So if I had to say, I would say keep it simple. And like Sue said, which is so true, you got to grow what you know your family's going to like, because the other thing about that is it might get the kids out, you know, engaged in the activity. And so, yeah, there's so many questions about raised beds here. So that I'm taking that as a sign, folks. Let me find one more question for you, Sue, because we're at about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay. Let's see. So we had a question about watering with water and from rain barrels, which we talked about a little bit last time.
I would love to talk a minute about watering with rain barrels. I also do the class on food safety and food safety in the garden. And watering with rain barrels is great if you're not taking it off your roof and if you're using it on a regular basis. You shouldn't water with rain barrels that are rinsing off from your roof, because that's washing all the bird poop and the squirrel poop and whatever else is on your roof, and the chemicals that are in your tiles down into your rain barrel, and then it's going to sit there and grow all sorts of pathogens that you're now going to put on your plants. Because the E. coli breakout, probably 10 years ago for the spinach, that came from water sources. You really want to make sure that your water source is clean. Rain barrels are great on ornamentals. If you use a rain barrel that just catches the rain and it doesn't run off of roots and things like that, then that would be fine to use in your garden. You shouldn't let your rain barrels sit and grow in the swamps. That's not good to put on your plants.
Yeah, generally we say rain barrels are great for flowers,
Yep.
but
Not on your vegetables.
Not on your vegetables. So, folks, it was wonderful having you, Sue. You know how I feel about you. This was great. And I think we have some good ideas about, you know, future sessions we can offer. And just to say it again, this session is being recorded and it will be posted with closed captioning up on the URI Cooperative Extension YouTube page. If you check that YouTube page out, just in the past 10 months, we've added 45-hour-long science-rich videos for your benefit and pleasure. So please check out everything that's there. They're categorized by topic generally. And until next time, 2 weeks, thank you very much for joining us for our Learn at Home webinars, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, thank you very much.